Mary Boyle was born on June 14, 1970 in Birmingham, England. Daughter of Charlie and Anne Boyle, she also had a twin sister named Anne, the same name as her mother, and another brother named Patty. Mary was described by her mother as a cheerful girl, full of energy and very talkative. It is said that she and her sister were inseparable. When Mary was 2 years old, her family moved to Ireland and lived in a small village called Kincasslag, which at the time had just 40 inhabitants. That way, they could be closer to the rest of the couple's family who already lived there. On March 17, 1977, the family made a trip from their village to their maternal grandparents' home in Cashellard, about 2 hours away, to celebrate St. Patrick's Day. Mary's grandparents' home was on a dairy farm located in a very remote and isolated area in County Donegal. All around was valleys, vast fields, lakes, and swamps. The next day, March 18th, around 3:30 p.m., the adults were inside the residence talking and preparing dinner, while Mary's uncle, Gary Gallagher, was repairing the roof outside the house. And Mary, after helping her mother wash the dishes, joined her brothers and 2 cousins to play in the property's land. At one point, Gary left to return a ladder he had borrowed from a neighboring farm. Mary saw her uncle leaving and decided to follow him. Gary noticed that Mary was following him, but he didn't mind and continued on his way. At a certain point along the path, there were holes and a puddle of water that was very deep, and Mary was unable to cross. At that moment, the girl decided to return home. They had walked for a short time, and he didn't think it was dangerous for the girl to come back alone, as it would take her more than 5 minutes to arrive. According to Gary, after Mary returned, he continued walking until he reached the neighboring farm, and when he arrived, he spent about 30 minutes talking to the people who were there. After returning home, he continued with his chores, assuming that Mary had already arrived well before him, so he didn't ask after her. Anne, Mary's mother, only realized that the girl was missing after she went to check on her other daughters and her nephews. She asked them where Mary was, but they all said they hadn't seen her for some time. At first, everyone thought that the girl had gotten lost along the way. After all, as I said before, the place was made up of lakes and lots of weeds everywhere. Mary's mother was desperate. In a remote area with no phone to call for help, they quickly left to search the area for the girl. Gary retraced the entire path he and Mary had taken before, but this time, calmly and constantly calling for the girl. But even so, they found nothing. The family noticed that there were 2 men in a boat fishing in a nearby lake, and Mary desperately leaned towards them for help. She was very afraid that the girl had fallen into the lake and drowned. The fishermen said they saw nothing, and took Mary's parents to Ballyshannon, the nearest town to where they were, to report Mary missing to the local authorities. According to the BBC website, the girl's mother screamed a lot, and the fishermen reported hearing her screams long before they could see her. The family was desperate. It was getting dark. There were many venomous animals in the woods. The terrain was full of holes and swamps. Mary was only 6 years old and was lost. It was the worst possible scenario for the girl to be alone. They spent all night looking for her. Not knowing what to do, Mary's elderly grandmother prayed a lot, lit candles and threw holy water throughout the house, asking God to protect her granddaughter. The authorities, with the help of volunteers, carried out intensive searches throughout the area around the farm and along the stretch traveled by Mary and her uncle. They had the help of divers and helicopters that flew over the region. Many swamps and lakes were drained and cleaned in an attempt to find the girl, or at least some trace that could indicate her whereabouts. Later, a fisherman told the local police that he saw Mary being placed inside a Volkswagen Beetle. She would then have been kidnapped. But later, in a podcast made by the BBC, the same fisherman went back and said that he had not seen Mary being taken, but that he only saw a red VW Beetle passing by. At the time of her disappearance, Mary was wearing a lavender coat, black boots, ribbons in her hair, and was eating a packet of potato chips. Some people even said that if she had fallen into a swamp, the packet would probably have floated to the surface. A large lake located behind Mary's grandparents' house was also completely drained, but no trace of the girl was found. The authorities even retraced Mary's last steps on the way from her grandparents' house to the place where her uncle last saw her. Her twin sister Anne was used as a stand-in the process to retrace the path, and the whole act was filmed, but it didn't help matters. Years went by, and despite the efforts of the authorities to find little Mary, they were unsuccessful. It was as if the girl had simply evaporated. In 2008, an Irish broadcaster broadcast a documentary about the case called Cracking Crime. Over the years, artist Margot O'Donnell, a friend and relative of the family, financed searches of neighboring farms in an attempt to locate Mary's body. Searches have continued since 1977, the last being in 2016. However, no evidence has been found. Mary's case is extremely controversial. Many theories about what may have happened have been raised, and there are several details that were not well investigated, such as the red Volkswagen Beetle that was passing by that day. One of the rumors was that an important politician had directly interfered in investigations, ordering the local authorities not to question the main suspect in the case, whose name was never released, but is known that he is a person very close to the girl's family. In 2016, an investigative journalist named Gemma O'Doherty produced a documentary about the case called The Untold Story that explores several possible causes for the disappearance. In the documentary, Anne Mary's sister claims she knows what happened to her sister Mary. That same documentary led to Gemma being sued for defamation by this politician, although his name was never mentioned at any point. In 2019, after his death, a judge granted her license to continue with the story. The first suspect, questioned shortly after the disappearance, was released without charge. Other people were also questioned, but all were released for lack of evidence. Another person who was considered a potential suspect was a serial offender operating in the UK at the time, named Robert Black. He worked as a truck driver and used a van to commit his crimes. Robert used to visit Count Donegal as a part of his work, and according to former detectives Chris Clark, a specialist in investigating old cases, says he has evidence that he was in that area at the time of Mary's disappearance. He was already known in the region, and his van was seen in the town of Annagry, which is about 1 hour from Mary's grandparents' house. A witness later claimed to have heard crying coming from the rear of the van, which was in a parking lot of a bar. However, this investigation also came to nothing. Robert Black claimed 4 victims, but it is suspected that he claimed many more. He was arrested in 1990 and sentenced to a total of 12 life terms. And in 2016, he died of a heart attack at the age of 68. Many believe that Gary Gallagher, Mary's uncle, is responsible for the girl's disappearance. Anne, Mary's sister, never openly accused her uncle, but Gary gave several conflicting testimonies throughout investigations, which suggested his participation in the case. In 2011, the land of the property was excavated under the supervision of police, but nothing was found. Mary's case is the oldest missing minor case in Irish modern history. Residents of the region still share news about Mary's disappearance on social media and ask that if anyone has any information about the girl's whereabouts, they contact the authorities. Anne, Mary's sister, had a daughter at the age of 17 and named her Mary Boyle in honor of her sister. Charlie, Mary's father, passed away in 2005 due to a fishing accident. Mary's mother and her daughter Anne are not on speaking terms because Anne and several other relatives believe they know who committed the crime against Mary and why. She says that she is very close to the family, but the two disagree a lot on this subject. Investigations are still ongoing. However, as several years have passed, it is necessary for Mary's mother to have a legal interest in the case for it to continue to be reviewed by the authorities. But this is where something very strange happens. While Mary's sister and a few other family members are interested in the case continuing to be investigated, the girl's mother no longer has any interest in the case. She even publicly scolded her daughter in 2016, calling her attempt to reopen the case of the most ridiculous sequel you've ever seen in your life. That decision was supposed to be made by the patriarch of the Charlie family, but as I already mentioned, he passed away in 2005. Today, Mary's grandparents' property is completely abandoned. According to Anne, Mary's mother, the last memory she has of her daughter was just before she disappeared, when the girl looked at her and said, "Mommy, I didn't kiss you this morning." And then she jumped up and hugged her. Then Mary ran outside to play with her cousins. Alright folks, so that's it for today. Thanks for watching until the end. Best wishes, and I see you next time.